All right, synthetic and analytical languages, part B, verbs. Let's just talk about the inflectional morphology of verbs. We talked about nouns in part A of this video. Verbs are going to be inflected in Indo-European for 5 different features. Voice. Has anybody ever had an English teacher say, use active voice, don't use passive voice? That is the role of the subject. Is the role of the subject doing the thing, or are they experiencing the thing, having it happen to them? That's voice. I walked the dog. The dog was walked. The dog walks, right? So the dog walks is active. The dog is walked is passive, right? Greek is a middle voice. I have no idea how that works. Tense should be a familiar concept to you. It locates verbal action in time, sometimes in an absolute way, sometimes in a relative way. You have a perfect tense, which says it's already happened. I don't know when, but it's already happened. Then you have like a pluperfect way, where it's like it had happened, right? And sometimes it will happen. It's going to happen. It will have happened. That's the future perfect. These are tenses. When is it happening? It's happening right now. We're familiar with tense. One thing we might be less familiar with, although we do have it in English, is aspect. An aspect talks about the relationship that the action of a verb has to time, not as to when, but for how long, how frequently, how habitually. Is it just once and then it stops, or is it an ongoing thing, right? So if you've learned in Spanish, for example, the difference between preterite and imperfect, that's a difference in aspect. I saw the man. I was seeing the man, right? See the difference there? In African American vernacular English, there are differences in aspect that don't exist in standard English. So, for example, like to say he work versus he be working, those actually mean 2 different things, right? He work means he has a job. He be working means he's at the job right now. I'm 90% sure that that's true, and I didn't just reverse it. We're going to get to AAVE in week 13, I think. So that's aspect. Then there's mood. Mood is the kind of, broadly speaking, the relationship of a verb to reality. You have the indicative mood. That's kind of the regular vanilla version of the verb. He is walking, right? The word indicative comes from a Latin word indicare, like your index finger, which means to point. It indicates what is going on. That's the indicative mood of the verb. Then you have the imperative, which is connected to impero, emperor, command. Do it. Make it so, right? Get out of here. Those are all imperatives. Come here. Give me a hug. All imperatives. Then there's the optative. I hope that he goes for a walk, right? I hope that he walks the dog. And that might have a different inflection. The verb might take a different form to indicate that it's in this phrase of hoping. Subjunctive is a similar, works similarly, and it can serve a number of different functions that generally you find in a relative or an subordinate clause, right? Like, he believes that they will come. They will come is in the subjunctive. The subjunctive is all but vanished in English. We see it sometimes just with the word be. Like, I hope that she be pretty instead of I hope that she is pretty. That be there is a subjunctive form. It's very uncommon and kind of old-fashioned, stilted, and formal in English. The other thing that verbs indicate, and we still have a bit of this left in English, though less than we used to, is person and number. I walk, you walk, she walks. We walk, you walk, they walk. So the only one we have left is walks, third person singular. Early modern English is a little different, right? I walk, thou walkest, she walketh. We walk, you walk, they walk, right? So we had one more in early modern, or 2 more in early modern English, I think. or maybe just one more, but that's person and number. And if you've studied a foreign language, you know that they can be inflected for a great many things. Latin verbs, let's look at, just as a case study, let's look at how the Latin verb works, okay? I love, amo amare is I love to love. Amabam, I was loving. Amabamus, we were loving. Amabas, you were loving. Amabatis, y'all were loving. Amabat, she was loving. Amabant, they were loving. As we can see, amo is the first person, but we have this inflectional morpheme in the middle, the ba, which indicates that it is imperfect. And then after the ba, we have these other endings, mst, mustis, enti, nt, that indicate that the person and number. So we have the mood is indicated by the first part, the voice, the tense and aspect, and then the person and number. It all comes together in these different morphemes come together the way it's inflected. And this is the active form. Now Latin has something that English doesn't, which is an inflected passive. In English we need to use syntax. We need to use different words. I was being loved. You can say that all in Latin in one word, amabar, and you substitute the personal ending with this one. The R replaces the M. And so that's what we talk about it being fusional, that we have several features of a verb being indicated by one morpheme, whereas in an agglutinative language, each feature is indicated by a different morpheme. This is a little bit technical and it's a little bit abstract, and if you're not getting it all for the purposes of English 491, History of the English Language, it's okay. This is just like, I'm just opening a door for you and showing you the world of linguistics inside it. We're not going to be using all of these tools, but we're going to be using some of them because Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Germanic and Old English did have a different verb system and a different noun system than modern English does. It's changed over time. We've looked at just some of the changes from early modern English. So this is just a little case study. Let's just a few more words about morphology here. We talked about phonology already. Now we're talking about morphology. Morphology in linguistics is the study of words, how they are formed, their relationship to other words in the same language. It analyzes the structure of words and parts of words, such as stems, root words, prefixes, and suffixes, as well as inflectional morphemes like we looked at already with the case of the Latin verb. Now there's two types of morphemes. There's free morphemes. These can function as a word without being combined with anything. Quick is a free morpheme. Li is a bound morpheme. I can say do it quickly, right? But li can never stand as a word on its own as such. It is a bound morpheme. It can only ever exist when it's connected to another. So there's two types of bound morphemes then. There are inflectional morphemes. These change the function but not the part of speech, such as our verb endings ed, s, t, etc. We've looked at these already. These include the stem changes in, we'll talk about this later, but in what are called strong verbs in English, like sleep and drink. We don't say I sleeped and drinked. We say I slept and drank. And we talked about this already in the first week with reference to how sound changes and the principle of how language changes and the principle of analogy and all that. Remember, those are. But inflectional morphemes do not change the meaning of a word, but they change how it's functioning in a sentence. They change its relationship to other words. A derivational morpheme, that's a whole different kettle of fish. A derivational morpheme changes the part of speech. Derivational morphemes turn nouns into verbs. They turn verbs into adjectives. They turn adjectives into adverbs, and so on and so forth. So slap, the verb, whack. You add the agent, what's called an agentive derivational morpheme, onto the end, and you get slapper. which is now it's a noun, right? Somebody who slaps is a slapper. Apparently it's a rude word in Britain. Don't Google it. The suffix e turns verbs and nouns into adjectives. So luck is a noun. If you have a lot of luck, you're lucky. If there's oil in your hair is oily and you need to change your shampoo maybe. Lee, we talked about Lee already, remember? Lee turns adjectives into adverbs. Quiet is an adjective. That boy is quiet. He does things quietly. All right. Wow, is that it? Okay, so free morphemes, bound morphemes, inflectional morphemes, derivational morphemes, morphemes. That's it for this week. Yeah, I'll see you in week 3. Bye.